Good evening, everybody. So we're back on, and we're talking tonight with Mr. Logan. How you doing, Logan?
Doing good.
We
How are
are
you,
just.
man?
I'm doing good, man. It's nice to meet you. We kind of met. I'm not sure what group we met in on Facebook. Now that I think about it, what was that group? Was it Fight on the Fence or
Uh,
was it?
it was atheist debate, all caps debate. Yeah.
That's what it was. Okay. Yeah, my account got hacked. Because I was under Scott Williamson. Um, and I have another Facebook account for my DJ stuff, and I got hacked, a couple weeks ago, and never been able to recover from it because I've been sending them like, forms of ID to kind of get you back on, and they reject them all the time, every time. So,
Oh man.
screw it. I said, let me just use the Dub Shine thing and go that way. So,
Yeah,
yeah, we
we've been
met.
having technical difficulties trying to set this up for the past few weeks.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. You've been having a little different. Yeah, it's really weird because we use StreamYard here for anybody that's interested. Well, you should know because you see it right there in the icon top right. And StreamYard is strictly Google Chrome, I think. And so if you're like on a Mac and you've got Google Chrome, sometimes it bugs out for some reason. And I think you had a MacBook or something like that, right?
Yeah, iMac.
iMac,
Yeah, it
yeah.
wasn't.
Yeah, so a little technical difficulty, but hey, we did it,
Here we
man.
are.
God made it happen. So,
There you go.
praise the Lord. So, anyways,
Amen.
amen. So, yeah, and we're gonna talk. We're gonna have a really good discussion. We're gonna be talking about experiences. The mysteries of experience. Which entails so much. And um, Logan has had mystical experiences. I've actually had mystical experiences. Even as an unbeliever, I've had experiences like that. So I can relate 100% to what you were saying. We may have somebody else come on tonight. I was just talking to her who is a mystic. Hopefully she'll be able to chime in and join the show if everything goes well, and we'll delve into that. But yeah, I just wanted to kind of explore the topic, see exactly how you ground your epistemology, what you mean by mysticism. So, where do you want to start in this conversation? Do you want to start just kind of defining what you mean by experience? I know it sounds kind of silly, but there are so many different, ways to actually define it. Like there's a dualistic and a monistic experience that people talk about. Um, some people say that they're either experiences of absolute ontological oneness of everything, free of any conceptual distinctions, and are just like pure consciousness or pure, unadulterated experience. And then there's when other people talk about these sort of mystical experiences, they're more dualistic, right? So they're saying that it's ways of coming to know God. And so there's a distinction between God and the experiencer or the mystic. So where are you coming at in all of that?
Well, that's an interesting question. I mean, like you said, I've had mystical experiences. I've had two that were like really powerful, profound, like visionary type experiences without the use of drugs. And if I remember correctly, the experience you're talking about, you had smoked DMT, and so I'd like to ask you a lot of questions about that because I never
Absolutely.
have. So, but um, yeah, I guess I could just jump right into the experience that I had firsthand, and then we can kind of go from there.
Hmm.
Uh, Let me just give a little like preface of like who I am and like uh, how I got to where I am, I guess.
Hmm.
So I grew up Southern Baptist in a Christian background. My mom was Sunday school teacher when I was really young, and so like she was teaching me the Bible at a very young age, and I grew up with that. I hopped around a lot of churches in my small town, and never really stuck with one very consistently. And so I got a taste of all the little differences of all the denominations, and um, I can't say I had like a very traumatic experience with the churches here.
Mm-hmm.
Um, these people are great people. They're wonderful people for the most part. The traumatic part about it for me was just the theology behind it. Um, so I've had to unlearn a lot of things that I've learned in the church and go back and rework it to end up where I'm at now. But back then, I was in that very typical mainstream Christian view of fire and brimstone, you know what I mean? And just living with that, like this angry God theology where any little thing you do, you're just angering God and you're destined for hell. And without Jesus, God hates you. I think all that is very destructive on anybody's psyche, you know. And so I remember a time when I was young and I was like really worried for my little brother's eternity, and I'm like trying to get him to get baptized with me and like really pushing it on him, and I was just freaking him out, you know what I mean? Like that's the exact opposite approach anyone should ever take at it. And it's unfortunate that's like more commonplace than anything. I
Mm-hmm.
feel like, uh, I feel like threatening people with eternal torture is horrible. Like that's awful, but it happens. So, and I'm not gonna deny that. Anyways, I fell out of the church.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually, I fell out of the church and chose a life of criminality where I was just doing whatever I wanted to do. You know, I got caught up in the wrong crowd and was stealing from convenience stores and smoking K2 and smoking
Mm-hmm.
weed and smoking cigarettes and, getting in a lot of trouble with the school. Ended up getting kicked out of my mom's house because I was having all these questionable people over. A bunch of her stuff kept on coming up missing. And she knew it was my friends I was having around. So it just got to a point where it was too much for her. And
Mm.
uh, so, yeah, I do have experience with drugs. I just don't have experience with DMT. So, but I have done hallucinatory like salvia and other stuff like that.
Mm.
But that wasn't really my drug of choice. My drug of choice ended up being meth.
Mm.
And after a while of doing that, obviously I got caught up and went to prison.
Mm.
And so, prison, this is where I had my first mystical experience.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I had got there and I was in this mindset of like, this is the worst thing that could possibly happen. I'm rock bottom, and I've done before this, I had done hit rock bottom multiple times. I'm like, dang, how low does this go? I thought I
Mm.
had already hit rock bottom. You can always go lower. That's the thing. It can always get worse.
Right.
But yeah, ended up coming across this book right here. It's called We're All Doing Time. Maybe
Uh-huh.
not see it very good.
Yeah, I can
But
see it.
if you
We're all doing time. Okay.
yeah, Bo Lozoff, he runs this. He's dead. He passed away in a motorcycle accident, but he runs this. It's called the Human Kindness Foundation, and they send these books out to inmates for free. All you have to do
Mm.
is write them. And so if you spend any time in prison in America, I'm sure you've seen this book before. And this is my first taste of perennial wisdom,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
so it's kind of got like a Alan Watts type vibe on it. But
Yeah.
the whole point of this book is like, look, you're in prison right now, and this is really the perfect opportunity, because you have a chance to do what people in the real world, in the everyday life, don't get to do, and that's, you get to build a spiritual foundation.
Mhm.
You're basically in a monastery, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
You have all this time to do whatever you want. You don't have to worry about paying bills and this, that, the other, everything that you normally have to worry about in life. Once you get back out here in the free world, it's so fast, you know. In there,
Mhm.
you know, you got a rigid structure. There's certain stuff you got to make sure that you do, but you also have a lot of free time on your hands. So I developed a lot of spiritual practices that I learned from this book.
Mhm.
And they write other books. I've read a whole bunch of other books, and I really got into studying other religions while I was in there. I'd grown up with Christianity, and I always had this sense of God that, like, even when I was young and in science class, cycle, the energies,
Right.
and I was like, man, that's just so beautiful, you know, like even certain stuff like how the size of the moon and the size of the sun lines up perfectly for an eclipse and all
Mm.
this stuff. I would just keep thinking about it and being like, yeah, this is God's masterpiece. This is beautiful, you know?
Mhm.
And even though I had this falling out with God where I was doing whatever I wanted to do, um, it's not like I ever stopped believing. It's more like I was like hiding. You know what I mean? Like I just
Mm.
didn't want to pray because I knew I was messing up and I felt
Mhm.
bad. And so, anyways, let's get to the experience. In prison, it's around Christmas time. I just got off the phone with my folks and I'm feeling really sad, really, really missing home. And just really trying not to think about it. So I go up to my bunk and I start meditating like I have been doing, practicing meditation.
Mhm.
And I'm really just trying to clear my mind so that I don't think about anything. I don't want to think about my problems, which is ironic because I don't know how long into my meditation, but trying to think of anything in particular. But all of a sudden, it was like I was transported to my past, like time traveled to a distant memory where I'm now looking at myself from a third person perspective. And this was one
Right.
of my like dark dark moments in my life where I had just gotten into a fist fight with my little brother, and
Mhm.
yeah, I was messed up from the fight. I had just wrecked my car. I got out into the snow. It was like blizzarding, and I was just driving off to get away from my house. My mom was screaming like, "Stop, stop!" And I was just trying to go away. I was just gonna go get faded and forget about it all.
Mhm.
And I was pulling into my cousin's driveway, but my windshield was frosted over, and I ended up smashing into his neighbor across the street who was parked on the side of the road.
Mhm.
Totaled my car. I got out, and I remember this vivid. Uh, it was crazy because during this experience, I'm like remembering the thoughts that are going through my head at that time.
Mhm.
So I get out of the truck. I turn around. It's totaled. It's smashed into the back of this other guy's truck. My eye is swollen shut at this point because right where I just got hit, I smashed my face on the windshield or on the steering wheel. And I get out and I'm just screaming and cussing at God because at this point, I'm like literally like screaming at the sky, like he's in the sky, like some guy in the sky.
The old man in the sky. Yeah.
But yeah, it was I was just like, why? Like, what did I do to deserve all this? Like, what? Why do you hate me so much? I thought like God was hating me at this
Mhm.
point in my life. No, it was all my stupid decisions that got me there. That was the thought that was going through my head, and then I sat on the curb and I just started bawling and crying. And this guy comes out of his house, the guy I just wrecked into his truck, and he's asking me if I'm okay. And I'm like, yeah, I'm good, man. But what do you mean? Like, look at your truck. And he's like, oh no, don't worry about that. But you look messed up, you know. Like, are you okay? Do you?
Mm-hmm.
And he went inside. He made me a sandwich and just stayed with me.
Wow.
Moment, I realized like God was talking to me through this person.
Mm-hmm.
It was like this divine insight where I had just got out of my truck. I had just screamed at God, I hate you. Why are you doing this to me? Why do you hate me? Blah, blah, blah. I'm like cussing at God. This guy comes out of his house and he's like, dude, it's okay. Like, it's all right. Don't worry about it.
Mm.
And when I made that realization, I felt a hand on my shoulder.
Mm.
And when I looked up, it wasn't like a person. I can't say it was like a fleshy figure like what you would see with me and you, but it was like a being of pure light.
Mm-hmm.
And after that, it was like I was shot all the way back up through all the memories leading to the present moment.
Mm-hmm.
And every little thing was like, it was like showing me how all of my little dark moments where I didn't feel God's presence in my life, where I thought God hated me or whatever, what have you. It was like he showed me that he was always right there with me, walking beside me the whole way.
Mm.
And so that very experience right there is actually what ended up bringing me back to Christianity.
Gotcha.
Where I was kind of leaning more into the lead, you know, at that point. I was
Mm-hmm.
thinking Buddhism, like maybe it's all just the mind. And
Mm-hmm.
but after that experience, when I got back to my jail cell, I was like crying but happy, like laughing and crying at the same time.
Mm.
It was, and you know, I was
Like
really
an
trying not to
enlightenment.
cry.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I was really trying not to cry. I'm in prison. These guys, like, I don't want to let them see me cry. I can't let them see me in a moment of weakness. That's why I went to my bunk to meditate. And then, boom, all of this stuff happens. And now I'm sitting up there, like, smiling with tears running down my
Tears.
face.
Right.
Yeah, it was insane. And so, but I tell that story to people and I try not to invoke Jesus. And they end up doing it a lot for me, where they're like, I think that was Jesus. You know, that sounds like Jesus, like someone who's
Mm-hmm.
walking by your side, showing you love and grace and forgiveness. No matter what you do, he's always loving you. And that's exactly what I felt.
Mm.
And so that was mystical experience number one. And after I got out of prison, I could say that it definitely had an effect. Like it I couldn't, and that's the thing with these experiences. Like when I have them, I have to wrestle with them directly afterwards, and like
Mm-hmm.
it's confusing to me. I still have to like try to solve it. You know what I mean? And
Mm.
so,
No. Mm-hmm.
and so, my biggest problem afterwards was that I still never loved myself. I still never forgave myself, and that was something I had to learn. Was through that experience, it was like, well, if God or Jesus or whatever can forgive you and love you, why can't you forgive yourself? Why can't you love yourself?
Mm-hmm.
And it took me a while. I ended up getting really depressed. I had a girlfriend who we were in a long distance relationship right when I got out of prison. She ended up cheating on me and getting pregnant
Mm-hmm.
while I was trying to like move down there to go live with her. And after that, I got real suicidal, like real low, real suicidal. And my sister invited me to church
Mm-hmm.
um, because of that, and I went to her church, and her church was really spiritual based,
Mm-hmm.
not really fundamental, but more. Uh, it's like an NAR church where they're kind of more into the gifts of the spirit, prophetic gifts or whatever. And I always was like, I didn't know what to think about that. I've always been real skeptical about that type of stuff. But after this experience, I was a lot more open to it, as you could imagine.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Mm-hmm.
so, anyways, uh, I got hooked up with this woman that went to the church, and she was like a therapist,
Mm.
uh, faith a faith based therapist, or like a
Okay.
coach, life coach, and she helped get me back to a sense of sanity, I guess you could say.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, I got on my feet. I got hooked up with the job that I've been working consistently. I got married. I had my daughter. She's almost a year old now, and
Oh.
my second mystical experience happened right after her birth,
Mm.
and it was different because I wasn't meditating. I was at work. I was literally in the process of painting. I'm a house painter. I was in the
Okay.
process of painting when it happened. And
Wow.
so I just had a daughter, and uh, I have all these thoughts going through my head of like the world that she's going to be growing up into. And I still have these thoughts. I still wrestle with this a lot. I'm very worried about the shape of the planet and the direction we're heading. Uh, but during this time, I was in the process of writing this really long, drawn out post of basically finger wagging. It may have been articulate, but at the time, uh, after the mystical experience was basically telling me like, don't post that.
Mm.
Don't post that. Everything you're about to say is wrong. Don't.
Right.
And that's what I think is crazy about these type of experiences is like it's very humbling, almost humiliating, in the sense
Yeah.
that it's a correction.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I took it, at least, is like um so anyways, I'm listening to a documentary about Taoism, and
About what? What
you
was
know
that?
Taoism.
About Taoism. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I was learning about Taoism, and I'm still
Mm-hmm.
like really in this uh search for the truth. You know what I mean? Like,
Mm-hmm.
even though I had that experience, I'm still trying to wrap my head around it. What was that? Like, what does it mean? What does all this mean? And
Mm-hmm.
I'm still in that process. I'll probably be in that process, my whole life.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I'm ever going to get to a definitive answer of what is the capital T truth.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
I'm listening to this documentary, and it's basically saying, stop trying. Stop
Yeah.
trying. It's like what
That's,
Yoda said, do or do not. There is no try. And,
mm-hmm.
I can't remember exactly what the documentary was going into, but then it hit me again. Boom. All of a sudden, and this was different than the last time. All
Mm-hmm.
of a sudden, I'm not in my body. Um, and the best way I can describe this, I know this is going to be kind of conscientious to invoke this term, but it how I could describe it, where uh, time seemed simultaneous, like
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
past,
Mm-hmm.
past, present, and future. It was all happening at the same time, like
Mm-hmm.
like
Mm-hmm.
same time or whatever. It's hard to
Mm-hmm.
explain.
Yeah.
That's kind of the nature of these experiences. It's like really. ineffable. It really is.
Mm-hmm.
And but in that, I saw that it was all perfect too. Like, and this goes to a old Christian mystic, Julian of Norwich,
Mm-hmm.
and she says here, I got it written down just so I don't misquote people. I have
Mm-hmm.
to. She says, he said, "Thou shalt not be tempted, thou shalt not be travailed, thou shalt not be distressed, but," he said, "thou shalt not be overcome, and all shall be well, and all manner of things shall be well."
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, that was the sense that I got out of this very,
Mm-hmm.
very brief flash. It was like an insight,
Mm-hmm.
but it was telling me like everything's gonna be okay. Everything's gonna be okay. Like there's no need. Like even this discussion with you, it's kind of futile, maybe, or maybe
Mm-hmm.
it's important. Who knows? But it's like there's what it showed me was there's nothing that anybody could do to ruin the
Right.
the outcome, and I don't even know what that is. It's not like I saw any specific details of what the future is going to look like, but it just told me that everything's going to be okay.
Yeah, I was sitting here thinking when you're telling these stories, they sound like your core NDE stories. I don't know if you're familiar with the near death experience that people report on, and it's all the same core elements. There's this being of light. There's this time seems to stop, and you're everything simultaneous. Um, and you have this overwhelming sense of you're okay, you're loved, you're you can do no wrong, and it's okay. Relax, just go through it. It's all part of the overall plan, so to speak. And that's the core NDE experience. And it sounds like what you're describing in all these accounts is something like that, you know?
Yeah, and that's interesing because, well, I guess we could go on to your experience. I can go ahead and ask you about that. But
Hmm.
um, in one of your previous shows, you had this guy on who was a perennialist, and he was talking
Hmm.
about mystical experience. And then you had brought up the DMT
Hmm.
experience. And I was just curious because, like, I tried looking it up today. I couldn't find anything definitive about it, but I'm not sure if like they have any research about people who go through a typical natural mystical experience without the use of drugs, if
Hmm.
DMT is actually active in their brain during those moments.
Hmm.
I think it'd be interesting to know if that was the case because I know humans release DMT during birth and
Endogenously.
during death and
Hmm.
maybe a little bit during sleep. But
Yeah. They say it may invoke dreams and things of that nature. So, yeah, I enjoy talking about my mystical experiences. DMT were the most powerful ones because they were induced chemically, which it helps gateway that situation, right? So it gives you it either quiets parts of the brain down to where you can have this impression, which entails like a lot of it's very visual, very powerful, and all of that. But I would back up in my case and say that there was a time, I'd say maybe 15 years ago, I was just studying, you know, mysticism, studying consciousness mainly, and I stumbled upon mysticism. I stumbled upon meditation and Kundalini, and I was like, well, I don't know what this attributes to, like whether it's some god or spirit or soul, or a lot of these concepts never really made sense to me metaphysically because of my background as a religious person who managed to escape out of the religion. So I'm really just not convinced either way. But I'm open, I'm very curious about these things. Like I want to know, what is it. Yeah, you know.
yeah, exactly. I think
And Yep.
Well, I was just
I
gonna
see
say, I think
Sophia. Sophia's carrot. She just jumped in. Hey y'all, how do I join? So I'm gonna give her the link here. Um, just a second here. So Sophia, just click on the link and you can jump right on in, sweetie. Yeah, Sophia is a really good friend of mine. We used to host a more political type of um, show. Um, but anyways, I'll go on with what I was saying. Anyways, I wanted to put this stuff into practice, right? So I said, well, I can't just say it's all bullshit because I haven't even tried it myself to even know. I can't just let my skepticism be something called hyper skepticism. I have to be kind of balanced. And, you can become what I've come to realize is that there's a trait, you can be so in debt, you can be so committed to unbelief that you've made unbelief a belief that you're committed to, and you don't want to know. You just want to be right. And everything that I was understanding about, Buddhism, Taoism, is this release and this disassociation with the self. Anatta is what they call it. This it's a construction where they say that this idea of self is not real. It's just it's a product of all of your memories, your genetic memory, your karma. All of this stuff kind of like combines to give you this illusion of self or soul. And so I was like, okay. So they said, well, once you go into Kundalini, it'll all become clear. So I tried and tried and tried to meditate, and then finally, boom, I had an experience. I was going through a separation with, my ex, and I was in North Carolina visiting my folks, and I was just doing a heavy meditation, and boom, I had this experience of where the energy kind of like they say you'll know it because it'll start from the crown of your head and it will travel down your body to your feet. That's exactly what happened. It felt like I was being struck by lightning slowly, like bzzz, and I could hear the ringing and the whole thing. I was like thinking to myself, "Oh, cool, I've done it. All right, let's buckle up and see what happens." And sure enough, I kind of had this impression of hearing things outside of my physical circle. So I was outside of myself, hearing the TVs closely of another room, and it was just a very, very warm, loving sort of impression that I was left with. And I came out of it like so grateful. I was in tears. I couldn't stop talking about it. I was like, "Whoa, big time." I was like, this is it. This is truth. This is this kind of embodied everything. And it never had that feeling again, but I did later on. At another time, I was doing the same thing, and then I felt that I saw this light, this great bright light that just engulfed me with love and feeling, and I was just bathed in it. And I came out of it again, tears, feeling really happy, very loving, very like I was on, um, Molly or something. I felt just so, warm and confident and, crispy. You know what I mean? And
it sets your heart on fire,
that was
doesn't it?
great. Yeah, I couldn't get enough of it, and I kept trying and trying, and then I started reading up about near death experiences and hearing about the videos. And so I was in California at the time. So there's this group called IANDS, AINDS. It's like a national near death experience conference that they hold, and then they had this group meeting they had every weekend Sunday. I think this pastor he was a Christian, and he was hosting it, and he would have all these NDEers come together, and just we'd all talk about experiences. And what I was there to do was interview them. So I was just interviewing all these people, and here comes Sophia. So I'm gonna add her to the stream before I
Hey,
get.
Julius,
Hey, girl, we
can you
see
turn the
you.
fan off real quick?
Uh-oh, Sophia, can you hear me?
My bad. Hi.
Hey,
Hold
how's
up.
it going?
Hello.
Hello. So
Sorry,
yeah,
I'm busting in
no
late and
worries.
shit. Oops.
No worries. I'm gonna
Can y'all hear me good? I can't
we
hear
can hear you
nothing.
real
Yeah.
good. Yes, ma'am. We can hear you. So yeah, so
Oh,
I was just kind of telling everybody here about my own mystical experiences. I think you're probably
yeah,
familiar with.
I've been listening. You ain't got to
Yep,
do that. Just keep on rolling with it.
there you go. Yeah, and so I went to Ian's these meetings and I was interviewing all these people, and they were just telling me the same thing. Is oh, it was just this experience, and I was telling them my experience, and they're like, oh yeah, yeah, yeah. The pastor there was like, yeah, you're being you tapped into it, you got there, through your experience. And we started talking about DMT, and the pastor was like, yeah, DMT is cool, man. Which I was really surprised to hear that from a Christian pastor. And
Right.
he was like, look, man, I'm a Christian, but I'm not your typical Christian. Like I'm using Christianity as an anchor for the mystical experience. Like he says Jesus was a mystic. And so he was always
Yeah.
talking about how people believe in the comic book version of Jesus. They believe in this superhero type figure. And they're missing the whole point. Like whether he even existed or not, it doesn't matter. The point is that what was taught is the mystical experience, and you can see it. The commonalities in all your different, like the perennialist, argument. And so he was telling me about DMT, and you can kind of get a flavor of NDEs through that. And so I was like, cool. So I went and researched a little bit about that. So my brother came and started living with me in California, and he knew like all the
Ah,
major designer drug dealers in LA. So there's this one dude, his name was Scott too, and he was a shaman. And so he would do ayahuasca on other things, and he had DMT, and he was like, look, I'll sit in with you and make sure that you guys can do it safely. I'm a shaman, I know what I'm doing, blah 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 blah. So he came to my apartment there in Laguna Hills where I was living at the time, and we sat down and we had a session, and it was mind-blowing. Of course, it was like biggest thing. And again, it was just like the Kundalini experience. It was just like all of that, this impression of love, timelessness. And basically, but the difference was it was way like a million times more powerful. So it was very
Right.
clear. So you actually saw the entities, the people, they would come to you in forms, forms of beings, and they would talk to me, and they were saying, look, and basically they told me, you can do no wrong. Um, your your reality is, you choose your reality, is basically what the impression I got from these beings. It's like you're projecting from the inside out, not from the outside in. So in other words, if you believe in Jesus and Jesus was the comic book character then that's your reality. That's how you see things. That's how you're going to interpret reality. But if you see it different, if you're an atheist, like you have, you're skeptic, then that's going to be your reality. It's all going to make sense to you that way, right? And so,
And I've actually heard the inverse of that, which I think is really interesting. Where
mm,
I've heard like people who were Christians had taken psychedelics and then it had this experience, and then afterwards they stopped believing in Jesus or whatever, or stopped believing in God and just decided that it's
well,
all in the
yeah,
mind. And then
I'll be honest with you.
later
You
that
make a
have
good
taken
point.
it go to what I mean, believing into a God. They after they have that DMT experience, they were like, well, I just don't have any other better words to use to describe what that was. So
Right, right. I understand that perfectly, because what happens is you get into this, you have an idea of what Jesus is and what Christianity is. That experience is going to throw you off like 100%. It's just going to throw you off. I'm not even going to lie to you. If you have an experience, it's going to throw you
well, can I
off.
say something?
Yeah, please chime in, Sophia.
For me, it was kind of the opposite. Like I was raised atheist, and I had all my tripping experiences and stuff as a young person.
Hmm.
And then I was introduced to Christianity, And then when I learned the Bible and studied the Bible, everything that I experienced on my trips, it explained the Bible to me even better. You know, like I read the Bible completely different from other people. So with me, it was kind of on the flip side. I had the experiences first, and then I understood what the scriptures mean. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
And I can attest to what she just said. Um, not just with the Bible, but like reading Christian
Yeah,
mystics before
yeah,
before my experience. I had no idea what they were talking about, and you know, there's
exactly.
a lot of mystics that like Marguerite Porret, or however you say her name. She was burned at the stake for being a heretic for the book
Mm-hmm.
that she wrote. Um, but that's kind of like how I thought about it going into it, hearing about all the myths. It was like, yeah, that's completely opposite from what they taught me at the church. So that's trash. That's
Mm.
nonsense. You know? And then after I had my experience, not only did I understand what they were talking about, but it also opened my eyes up to a different level of understanding when it came to actually reading the Bible. And I think that's where a lot of this contention comes in with this term mystic, is because like whenever religion, and this is how I see it happening, all these religions are based off of these experiences that humans
Mm.
have.
They can get down.
Uh, but then along the way, it's like people lose track of that experience, and then it becomes just about the words and the rules.
Mm.
But there's
Yeah,
still a pathway. It's like the stones are still there. If you walk down it with a whatever diligent heart, open heart, and one key part of it, I think, that is really important is that you have to be free of dogma. So you can't be clinging on to these things that you think are definitely ultimately true. That's why I think more skeptical minded people are way more likely to have these type of experiences, because they don't have these self imposed limitations on
Mm.
what can and can't be possible. You know, they're
Mm-hmm.
open to possibilities, and
yeah,
that
I
makes them
agree.
more open to these type of experiences.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but that being said, it's like, yeah, now, you know, you have Hinduism, which is a very broad term, but then you have Vedanta, which is like the more mystical interpretation of Hinduism. Then you have
Mm-hmm.
Islam, but then you have the Sufis, which is like the
Right.
more mystical aspect of Islam.
Mm.
And then you have Buddhism, but then you have like Zen, which is like
Mm-hmm.
more in line with what all the mystics are saying. And Taoism is the same way. It's very in line with most what the mystics are saying, especially when it comes to like the ineffability of God. When the Tao Te Ching says, the name that can be named is not the eternal name, and the way that can be explained is not the eternal way. I just see that as the Taoist masters, Lao Tzu, saying you can't really talk about God, and that's key. Um, like you can, but ultimately anything you say about God will be insufficient. It just
Mm-hmm. And
Yeah, because
heretical.
you,
it's more about the experience when it comes to mysticism. It's not about the what I call literalism. Like it's just you can talk about it in a literal sense, but you're not gonna like fully grasp the meaning. So you can sit there and read the Bible all day, but it's just gonna confuse you without the or mystical experience. So when I started reading the Bible again after I had those experiences, you know, it was completely clear to me that these people had spiritual, mystical experiences that they wrote down. It wasn't some literal thing they saw with their eyes. Like, you know, when Jesus was came back to life and all that, they were all in meditation experiencing that. You know what I'm saying? So
Mm.
you can sit there and read the words, but without the experience, it's not gonna make any sense to you.
Right. Right.
see,
Yeah.
bro.
And then Logan mentioned that he was kind of
Jesus
interested
Christ,
in
man, my
some of the
platform.
more scientific framework for interpreting the mystical experience. I know you wanted to kind of get into that because I have a few, you know, you know, well, I'm going to go ahead and hold that for later. But Logan, are you still with us? You kind of frozen on the screen though.
Move, Cookie.
He might want to restart.
Damn, he
I'm going to
stuck.
remove you. Yeah, just restart, go back in. He's using a telephone, and so it can
But a
oftentimes cause.
telephone, a telephone. What is a telephone?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you know, I'm telling my age right now. He's using his mobile phone.
Who the heck still says
Telephone.
telephone?
Oh,
Oh
here he
shit!
comes. I think he's back on. You hush, Sophia.
This this man said telephone. Shit.
Telephone. Okay.
I got the little
Where the
rotary
telephones
number.
at, Scott?
The big, yeah. Remember, you had to, man, I hated those phone numbers that had like, you know, the 9. You had to go all the way
the rotary, the
around.
rotary
Oh, damn it, I
phone.
missed the damn number. Shit, I got to start all over again.
This man said you using a telephone. I
Damn
can't believe it.
telephone. God damn it. Yep.
Close enough. Just enough.
So,
That was
Logan,
funny, man.
I know you mentioned you like to look at the scientific explanations of the mystical experience. And I've looked at that too, you know, and it's very interesting. I have another point of view on that, but let me hear your point of view. What have you learned that science tells you about the mystical experience? What does that do on this whole discussion?
All right. So before I get into this part, I just got to let everyone know that I'm not a scholar. I didn't go to college. I went to prison, obviously. So I never went
You
to
said
seminary
prison.
yeah, prison. Yeah, prison. I was in prison for like a year and a half. It was a blessing. It was like the best thing.
I just didn't expect that. This man said he's not a scholar. I went to prison. I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah, no,
Exactly.
Y'all killing me
it was a
today.
blessing. It was the best thing that could have happened to me. I consider it like God separating me from my addiction when I really needed that in my life.
Mhm.
Prison was,
Right.
you know, it's not something everybody wants to go do or anything, but I used it to my advantage and I kind of turned it into a monastic lifestyle, which helped me on my spiritual path. So, but anyways, yeah, so I'm gonna invoke quantum mechanics again, and I know this is like really, you know, it's that spooky thing that nobody really knows exactly what to think of it, and there's a lot of theories going on.
Shut up,
What I
Oscar.
want to focus on is like the wave function aspect
Mhm.
of quantum mechanics. So we all know that, you know, physical matter is made out of atoms, but there's this like unobserved world, this unmeasured world where
The subatomic
when we're not,
realm.
yeah, whenever we're not
Potentiality.
taking measurements or observing reality, the way atoms typically function collapses into waves. And so it's like waves of light, like light waves, you know?
Yeah,
That's kind of
photons,
how I
right?
see it.
Photon.
So, but it's also ineffable. Like you can never really pinpoint it, right? It's
Mhm.
ungraspable. Like you could never really know for sure the exact position of this electron. It's like in a superposition where it's everywhere,
Mhm.
nowhere at the same
Non-local.
time.
Yeah. Mhm.
And so that right there is God. Like that's like the paradoxical, ineffable nature of God in my view. And so everywhere, and I know this is very this is very God of the gaps, and I'm very aware of that. And I don't really have any way to
Well,
justify it.
let me just jump in before you go on. I'm kind of like very understandable with what you're saying, because me, I'm a naturalist. Like I'm a pantheistic, like a naturalistic pantheist. So what that means is, whenever on the topic or language of God, I always look at the nature of reality as doing the same work as the supernatural kind of God, right? So if someone was to say, well, what do you ground reality in, or what do you ground observations and all that, I would say the quantum field. The quantum field is non-local, it's everywhere, it's all powerful,
Wait, bring
it's
me my
where
glasses. I can't see
physical
shit.
reality evolves from. So I understand what you
Daniel,
mean.
bring
I'm
me
right there with you. It's a more, and I'm not a scientist, or I'm not trying to make it into a science. I'm just saying that philosophically, on the discussion of God, I guess what I'm saying is nature, the nature of reality explains everything by definition. So it's just that I don't have to kick the can down the road and say
Right.
that
Right.
beyond
That
that
is
there's this other thing. Like I can leave that out. Like I don't. It's not necessary to invoke the supernatural God guy. I could just say that, hey,
so,
it's just the nature of reality, which entails quantum fields and everything else. But anyways, go ahead, man.
right. Okay. So, going along with that, the mystics, a lot of the times, they'll use this terminology to describe God, especially if they have a very negative theology, which is like God is no thingness,
Mm-hmm.
because God is not a thing. God transcends thingness, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, from my worldview, I like you can see all the instances where that would be applicable in this quantum reality. So,
Mm-hmm.
for instance, black holes. This is part of Einstein's equations. He predicted they would be there. We ended up finding out they are there. Um, but the black hole itself is represented. Oh
Uh-oh.
no! Yeah, I'm going back.
We can hear you. We can
Back.
hear you.
Uh, it's also like a very distinct lack of anything. Like there's not things in a black hole, or like we don't really know what is in a black hole. But you can tell when you look at it that it's not a thing. You know what I mean? There's nothing there. It's an infinite nothing in
Yeah,
this black hole.
singularity. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Singularity. Also, so going back to the origin of the universe. So when you're looking out at the edge of the universe, we get this background radiation,
Mm-hmm.
and that's like the furthest into the past, because that's basically what it is. That's the past. It's taken all these years for that radiation to be able to get to the telescope that picked it up.
Mm-hmm.
But that's also where God is. He's on the other side of that background radiation, which is this nothingness. Like, you know what I mean? And there's a lot of debate over whether the universe actually had a beginning, if the Big Bang actually happened, or if it's just been eternally here. Maybe it starts over, expands, and retracts. We don't really know the answers to these definitively, but I think consensus is that there was a Big Bang and that we've been expanding ever since.
Mm-hmm.
But that, so
To me, the Big Bang is like a single line that fractured in a way. Like, you
yeah,
know what
and
I'm
that's
saying?
another. It's another singularity, and so this singularity
Right.
that caused the Big Bang. There's little smaller singularities scattered all throughout the universe. That without these black holes, there would be no life. Like the universe wouldn't be able to sustain life without black holes, and it also ties into quantum theory in the sense that quantum entanglement. So when you look at a
Okay,
star
now
that's
can I ask you something?
Say that again.
I'm trying to ask him something. So you're saying that you can explain what happened before the Big Bang and what caused it?
I'm just saying that if there is a God, that it would have been the cause of the universe, the original cause, the source of all this. What's also holding all of this together right now as we speak in the present moment, it's the no thingness in the black hole, it's the no thingness before the universe, the thing what we call nothing, that everything came from.
So
It's
how are
also
you
the
defining
nothing.
nothing? Let's go into that, because when you say no thingness, so obviously like quantum fields and stuff like that are pretty much like coordinates, or like a probability distribution, which is based on mathematics and equations and stuff way above my pay grade. But they're not
Mind you.
things. Is that what you mean? Like they're not I mean, they're physical in the sense that they interact with the physical world, but they're not things, I guess. They're not matter. So you're saying that there's this thing that's not a thing, this no thingness. Because there's a question, somebody was confused. Rude Mudcrab says, huh? A black hole isn't a nothing, it's a super dense something. So something versus nothing, what are we talking about here? Have you
Yeah, yeah. So and this is where it gets confusing. I'm not saying nothing.
mhm.
Um, the no thingness is something that transcends thingness. And so here's another, to tie it back into mysticism. Um, I am not a thing. Like when I get really down to who am I? What am I?
Mm.
I myself am not a thing. Like you can, you know, reduce
So
it,
you could say your energy or light or photon energy, right?
you could say that. But I don't even think I would go as far as putting that label on it. So it's like, check this out. All right. So I got these. These are my labels. Label number one, I'm a Christian. All right. I believe
Mhm.
Jesus is the way, the truth, and the light. Mystic. There's label number two, perennialist. Label number three, idealist. Label number four, universalist. I think everyone is saved. Existentialist. That's my philosophical. I think we all have a responsibility to um, discover the meaning in our lives and to live a life of authenticity, and it gives me a sense of urgency. And then, oh yeah, check this out. This one is probably the most bizarre. I'm agnostic, so like I don't have any definitive truth claims. I like. Uh,
Hey,
I
I'm a
don't
little
know
bit.
if Jesus. I don't know if
You're doing
Jesus
too
is
much,
God.
man. No, I'm just kidding.
I don't know if Jesus is God, but I'm not going to say for sure he is, or if he
Yeah, I
isn't,
get
I
your
don't
point.
know.
Yeah. All
But
those
all these
constructions. So you're
labels
saying they're
are
constructions, they're
ridiculous.
labels.
Yeah, and they come with a whole bunch of preconceived notions that I think are troubling. But none of this is who I am.
Right.
Logan is just my name. This is just my body. But this is not like what what is me?
Right,
Like
but
what
how would
defines
you how would you define the you, right? If you had to explain it to somebody, would you say it's just or
And if I had
is it
and if I had to explain it to somebody, I would say I am being. I am being. And
you
that's what
are?
I believe God is as well. So in that sense, God and I are on the same ground. But my being is not necessarily a thing. It's just this experience. It's my first person view from my eyes being me right now. It's this present moment. This is what I am from my perspective.
Mm,
And
mm.
so in that sense, I could see why a lot of the mystics, including Jesus, would say, yeah, like God and I are the same thing. Me
Mhm.
personally, right now, I don't
Right.
feel like I am God. I wouldn't say that. Like I don't have complete control over the quantum probability field or whatever, you know. But um,
It's just
Meister
like
Eckhart.
being a fractal.
Meister Eckhart touches on this when he uses the word Grund. It's a German word that means ground, but he's saying like us and God are on the same ground in that sense.
Okay. So, oh, I think you froze up.
This is how we are made in God's image. Like my pure consciousness is just as ineffable and unfalsifiable as God is in that sense, you know. And it's like I think,
I mean,
therefore, go ahead.
Go ahead. Sorry, the lag is messing me up here, man. No, I was just agreeing with you. I was saying I kind of see it similar. I probably would say different, but I kind of see it like, kids, right? The offspring, they kind of are made in your image, right? Because they come out look at the parents most of the time, right? So it's like we're just fractals of whatever, God is.
Fractals, yes, exactly. That's exactly how I picture it. So, yeah, so we share that aspect with God, and so yeah, I think therefore I am, and I know that to be a fact. That's the realest thing that I know. Like my experience is the only thing that I can guarantee is true. Now,
I think you're
now I'm starting to fall into solipsism, right? But no, I believe all of y'all are just as real as me. I believe everybody on the planet is having the same experience I am. And then I just take that one step further and say, like, okay, but there's this thing that I've experienced that a lot of people have experienced all throughout history, and it all ties together. It's all relative. It's coherent, and
well, it's just like a body.
That's what I call God. And
yeah, but it's damn it.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I feel like I'm butting in, but it keeps freezing, and I don't know when you like. You know what I'm saying? Like it's bad.
It's a delay.
Sorry.
You're good. Go ahead.
I was just saying, like it's like a body, right? The left hand don't know what the right hand doing, but the brain know what both are doing. So every member has a function, and I mean, you can only experience your own experience and do your task. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and see, like that's something that Scott was saying in another show that I was watching. It's like I don't think one person really has the ability to contain the whole truth. Or, I'm sure some ascended masters throughout history, like the Buddha and Jesus, were able to like walk in that capital T truth. But the most of us, we just get little brief glimpses and flashes of this quote unquote truth, whatever it is. And I call it God. And I don't think it matters very much if you don't call it God. I don't think it matters very much what you call it. It's like it doesn't need a name necessarily. I call it God.
Well, here, let me provide a little.
Man, even the Bible has a passage that says that when dude was going off on different churches and accusing, telling them that he had faults against them for how they worshiped God and everything. He actually said that the church that was worshiping a nameless God was closer to the truth than those who, had all these labels. That's even the Bible.
Yeah, but what about what Alejandro said? What about Alejandro? He said last
week. Trying to hear that
shit. Come on now. Alejandro.
All right,
Alejandro.
Go ahead. You just have to bring him up.
He said if you argue that, you're arguing for a poop sandwich. Remember? Because he said, because I tried to say the same thing Sophia's saying right now, but then he said, but if you do that, that's like saying, giving somebody a poop sandwich and telling them it's a ham sandwich. So you're all thrown off, man.
Well, and
that is crazy as hell.
That's the biggest thing when it comes to all this is like it's that level of contention. See, I can talk to skeptics a lot easier than I can with my own religion, which I think is really sad. I think Christianity should be inherently mystic. I think that the fact that there is a term Christian mystic is just a little disheartening, discouraging to me. Like I think Christians should be more mystical by nature,
Yeah, you're right.
and
Yeah,
but you know
but you know
they
what? I
really
think the early
discourage
church was.
meditation. They're like, no, that's a different religion, and it's sad because like I can
You're
show them a
heretical.
quote from the Buddha, and the Buddha says, "You reap what you sow." And they're like, "Nah, I'm a Christian. I
Right.
don't believe in the Buddha." And then I hold up
That's so
the
stupid.
Jesus saying the exact same thing. You know, it's like, well, come on, you got
Exactly,
to agree. You
exactly.
know,
That is so
yeah, it's
dumb.
like
I
word
mean,
for
it
word.
really is.
I
But
think
that's
the
what they
church,
do
and I
because
think a lot of. Oh, go ahead.
I was saying that's what they do because like you said earlier, they're all you know, imprisoned by this dogma, you know, and they're not allowed to, you know, go outside of that. It's just that simple.
You're trying to paint,
Right.
like Alejandro said, you're trying to paint outside the lines. You can't, you can't. If someone gives you a coloring book, you're not supposed to paint outside the lines. You're supposed to paint within the lines. So,
And
Yeah, but
that's a big problem too with this. It's like the biggest growing religion right now is what's called the nuns, Nones, not Nun, but
yeah,
Nones,
yeah,
where
yeah, yeah.
they're identifying as spiritual but not religious. It's like people who have fell out of the church and they still want to have a spiritual life, but it's very autodidactic, where it's like, well, now you don't have a teacher. Like, how are you going to learn if you don't have a teacher, if you're not following any
Right.
master or guru? And it's like,
yeah,
I don't
they
know.
always say you need some kind of medium. You need a medium between you and God because we can't allow you to discover these things on your own. We have to tell you what to think and believe.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and
And
once you go
you're cutting
discover
out the
things on your
middleman.
own, yeah, yeah, and that's what Jesus did. You know, if you really think
You
about it,
sure
Jesus
damn
was
did.
cutting out the middleman. Yeah,
Yep.
and that's what I think is so crazy about the world we live in right now. Is just, you know,
Well,
it's
man,
still
so
going.
Well,
I didn't tell you.
it's
I
because
told Logan.
they have. It's because they've made the establishment God, government to govern our minds. I mean, that's the God of this world. It's the government. It's the establishment. So
Yeah.
you know, if you become a mystic and you just let your experience teach you, then you can't be socially engineered to serve the machine. I know I sound
Right.
crazy as hell, but I mean that's what it comes down to, man.
So here's a question I can present to both of you guys. So, and we kind of touched on it a little earlier, but some people put more emphasis on the, um, like the experience itself. Like some people are more focused on what is the impression of the experience. Is that more important, or the attribution? Like the experience happens, therefore there's this separate God out here that's waving his finger at you, and this kind of proves it. Or is it just the experience itself that's more important? Like, I would ask you that because, see, here's the thing, and the reason I bring this up, you've got a lot of skeptics out here that they're ready to deny you your experience because they'll say, "Oh, you're making the a logical fallacy. It's an anecdotal fallacy, and it occurs when people use their limited personal experience to make sweeping conclusions about a given topic, right? It's an exceedingly common fallacy to commit, and nearly everyone has done it at one point or another, right? But it's still a fallacy. So they're going to say, well, because you had a personal experience of something that you can't explain that seems ineffable for you, well, so do a lot of mentally ill people. Does that mean the insane asylum is full of truth people that are telling the absolute truth when they're all saying different, they're pointing to like somebody saying, "Hey, this proves my experience proves Jesus." One guy saying my experience proves Vishnu, on and on and on. you know, or is that what we need to focus on? Like, what's causing the experience, and then let's focus on preaching that gospel, or are we just supposed to embrace the impression of the experience?
No, I think even speaking about the experiences themselves does them a huge injustice, because, like she had said earlier, it's like there's no way you could put yourself in my shoes while I was in prison going through my dark night of the soul or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, I can tell you about it, but there's no way that I could ever give anybody that experience. And
Mm,
I wouldn't even go as far as saying that the experience itself is what anybody should be aiming towards. I think that it was a random, miraculous event that happened in my life, but I feel like people go their whole lives without ever experiencing that. And these are people that are leagues above where I'm at, morally, spiritually, or whatever. I'm not some perfect guy. I argue with my wife. I have a very regular life. The only difference between me and somebody else is maybe that I have incorporated different spiritual practices into my life.
mm,
But that being said, it's like, I think that the spiritual practices themselves is what everybody should do, whether you believe in God or not. And I know the should, that word is very troubling. Like, do whatever you want. Do whatever you want. But I
mm.
think if you're
Right. I was
struggling with a
gonna.
bunch of stuff in your life, meditation can help you out a lot. There's different breathing techniques, yoga. I do Tai
Mhm.
Chi. I've been picking up Tai Chi. I think Tai Chi is awesome. And there's all kinds of stuff, like even this right now, this dialogos, where
Mhm.
we're all bouncing back and forth off of each other, trying to build something. This is the spiritual practice. And,
Mhm. Mhm.
I'm glad to be here. I need more of this in my life. I don't have a whole lot of people I can have these type of discussions with, but
Well, hey, if
stuff
you
Right.
like
You
if
say that all
anytime you
the
want to jump
time.
on, you're more than welcome, because I love these discussions, and I would agree with you that just having these discussions are beneficial spiritually or psychologically, whatever language you want to use. They kind of help to unify our beliefs with our epistemology, you know, and kind of understand which is why I have these things. I love these kind of discussions, and I don't have them enough either. This is why I have the channel, you know.
right, yeah. And actually, you said something that I in one of my comments on one of my posts the other day that I wanted to ask you about,
Hmm.
because I've been battling with this thought for a long time of, like, what does it mean to really be a Christian? Because a lot of
Hmm.
times I'll tell people, yeah, I believe in Jesus. I believe he's the way, the truth, the life. And then I start talking about all my secondary beliefs, and they're like, I don't think you're a Christian, dude. I think you need to, like, go back to the drawing board, because that's not what we believe.
Yeah,
But
that's
you know what
Pastor
though, like
Darnell.
you know what though, I think that is very crazy because like the from my understanding and my research, the early church was very you know more mystical.
Gnostic.
Okay, they didn't take scripture literal like Christians do now.
Hmm.
So I think that the literalism came later to water it down, to
Hmm.
water down the message. You know, with that being said, I think that somebody like you or me, I don't know if I'll get him on one day, but I think that we're closer to what. Damn it, my shit's fucked. Can y'all still hear me?
Yeah, we can hear
Yeah,
you. You froze though.
Um, I think that our interpretation of it is more accurate than the literal interpretation, because what would be the point? Like,
Right.
what would be the point of walking on water? Like being able to physically walk on water. Obviously, there's a hidden meaning behind it.
And yeah, thank you.
oh,
And Sophia, you just dropped, but feel free to come back in. There's a video I found with a discussion between atheist Bill Maher and Jordan Peterson on that very topic, about the Bible. And have you ever seen this discussion, Logan?
I haven't.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and it really goes along with what Sophia is talking about. You know, this literalist, this being literal. Sophia, can you hear me? Okay, though.
Yeah, I can hear you now. I just got kicked out for a second. I don't know
Have
what's
you
going
seen
on.
this video between Jordan Peterson and Bill Maher?
No, I have not yet.
Okay, I'm gonna play it to let you hear because it goes right along what Sophia was just saying. And so I just thought, wow, this is really ironic. So let me throw this out there, and we'll check it out and
God bless that.
see what you guys think about that. You know, hold on, just a second.
Okay, shut up, Ozzy. Damn.
There's a
Sorry,
very
my cat.
interesting idea that lurks behind the notion that you can establish a covenant with God. And
Well, I mean, the Bible is so well known, even by people who haven't read it. And by the way, a lot of the people who put their hand on it and love it so much have never read it. Certainly not all the way through. It's a big, long book.
yes, it is.
And it's full of mostly nonsense. Once in a while, it stumbles upon wisdom. I mean, it's but come on, you got to give these people their due. I mean, it was written as, first of all, it's an anthology.
I'm going to tell you a story.
Okay. A
Tell me
Bible
what
story?
you think about Bible story. I mean, this is Jordan
I
Peterson's
love your Bible
story.
stories.
Okay, this is a Bible story. So I've been looking at the story of Jonah.
Yeah.
And this is a story that you'll appreciate. So here's what happens to Jonah. He's just minding his own business. And then the voice of God comes to him, and the voice says, you have to go to this city, Nineveh, because everybody in Nineveh is like, they've strayed off the path, and I'm thinking about wiping them out. But you could maybe go there and tell them like how foolish they are, and they'll straighten up, and then I won't have to destroy the city. And Jonah thinks, there's no goddamn way I'm going to do that. First of all, Nineveh is a city of his enemies.
Babylonia.
It's a city that he's not allied with, and so he thinks, well, you guys can go to hell in a handbasket, and if God wipes you out, that's perfectly fine with me.
Right.
And then he also thinks, like any wise man would, it's like, I see, this is the task you have for me. It's like, there's 150,000 people there. I'm a foreigner. I'm going to go there and tell them how they're misbehaving, and that's going to work out well for me. So he thinks, to hell with that, like any sensible person would. And he doesn't say what he has to say. Right. So then he hops on a boat and he gets the hell out of there. Well, it turns out that God's not very happy if you're informed that you have something to say and then you don't say it. So the storms come and the waves rise, and now the ship's in danger. Okay, so what does that mean?
Got in the whale.
Yes, that's right. It means that if you don't say what you have to say when you're called upon to say it, you'll put the whole damn ship at risk. Now, the soldiers figure this out, or the sailors, they figure out, there must be someone on the boat that like isn't right with God, and that's why we're in danger of being swamped. So they will go and ask everybody, and Jonah, to his credit, says, yeah, it's me. You know, I had the voice of conscience made itself manifest to me. I had a task to do. I refused it. I'm screwing things up. And the sailors actually try to save him, but it doesn't work, so they throw him overboard. Now you think, okay, Jonah's got what he deserves because he shut the hell up when he had something to say, and now he's going to die. And you think that's pretty damn rough. And partly what that means is if you hold your tongue when you have something to say, then you're going to put the ship at risk, and you'll be lucky if you don't die. All right, but that's not enough. That's not nearly enough, because that isn't all that happens if you don't say what you're called upon to say. So the next thing that happens is Jonah's drowning away. That's about as bad as it gets. And then this creature from hell itself comes up from the bottom of the abyss and takes him down. And so now he's in hell for 3 days. And so that's the next part of the story, which is that if you're called upon to say what you have to say and you refuse it, like, you'll end up in a place where you wish you were dead.
Not the whale?
Yeah, it's the whale.
Oh, okay.
But it's the same thing. Like that in the story, the whale is described as hell. It's exactly the same idea.
In Religulous, the guy who was arguing with me, and he said this point was very important to him. He said, the Bible does not say whale. It says big fish. Okay, well, now it makes perfect sense.
Yeah, well, it's the thing. Well, what it is, it's a representation of the thing that dwells in the darkness.
It's so interesting that you see the lessons in these, and I just always read these things as like super fucking stupid from the Bronze Age, you know. And obviously, they were telling people something. I mean, whoever wrote this had a message in mind.
Well, they were trying to look. They were trying to figure out by telling stories how the state itself got corrupted, and this is one of those stories. So the story is, here's how the state gets corrupted. You're called upon to tell your fellow man, enemy or not, when they're not behaving properly. When your conscience tells you to do that, you're called upon to do that. If you don't do that, the whole ship will start to rock.
But do you think the ancients who were reading this at the time, and they read the story about he gets swallowed by the big fish or the whale, you think they got this message? They were like, yeah, but what this really means is when you're called upon, excuse me, I'm talking, when you're called upon, then you step up and do it.
No, I would say it's a step, and it's a dreamlike step in the developing of understanding. So before you fully understand something, you can represent it in a story, right? It's kind of halfway. A kid who starts to understand something by acting it out.
They may. I mean, they may have gotten it, or they may have gotten it on an unconscious level, right?
They got it at an implicit level,
On
which
an
is what
implicit
you,
level.
yeah, well,
Right.
that's what you
Okay.
get when you watch a story, is you get it at an
Right.
implicit level. And it's actually very powerful, right? I mean, when people go to movies, most of the time, most people, when they go to movies, don't sit around afterwards and discuss what the movie meant. They just enjoy the story.
Right.
Yeah, we can go ahead. I think Jordan Peterson, he's on to something in a lot of these discussions that he has on the Bible. I think it's interesting that he doesn't identify as a Christian, or, you know, whenever someone asks him to defend his belief in God, he's like, well, what do you mean by believe, and what do you mean God? And
Oh yeah.
he does,
Mhm.
he does
That's
all these
because, you know,
interesting
I kind of interpret that as you know, he's trying to appeal to a lot of people, and so he doesn't want to like isolate himself out, because there's a lot of his followers, most of the people that really follow what he says, I think, are men, and mainly his I guess his core message is about men taking accountability and responsibility for their life and blah blah blah. And so he's become a little more religious using that language in order to kind of convey those messages, and he's figured out a way to look at the Bible in a certain kind of way. So he doesn't really want to commit either way. I understand professionally why, maybe personally why, but regardless, I kind of like see the point that he's making. Whether, I don't really know if that's, you know, what their Bible writers had in mind or whatever when they wrote it, but in either case, you know, you can still make that same point, like even with the Gospels, with Jesus, you know, resurrection, walking on water, feeding, you know, the multitude, all of these miracles, you can kind of look at them as lessons, or and not take them as literal events, you know, if it doesn't work with you in that way. So I
Yeah,
don't know. Yeah.
I play with it a lot because, like I said, I'm very agnostic when it comes to a lot of this stuff. What's his name? I have that written down. Dr. David Eagleman has this TED Talk on possibilianism that I think is really good. I think everybody should go check that out. But possibilianism is this like in a religion that he invented. That's basically like the agnostic religion, where they basically just take agnosticism and then break it down so that it's like really articulate, and like, you know, there's a lot of things that we just can't be certain on. The miracles aspect, yeah, it's like probably very likely that didn't happen, but if it did, what does that tell us? That's how I kind of like, if Jesus is God, and this is what God did while he was here on earth, what does this tell us about God? And does this relate to my everyday experience? That being said, like a lot of what Jordan Peterson talks about in his Bible talks, it's like very eye-opening to a lot of people, because they're like, yes, I have experienced that in my everyday life. It's crazy because I never connected the dots like that before listening to Jordan Peterson talk. But yes, it's like this thing about Jonah. It's like I've been there, where I feel this urgency of there's something I got to say. You know what I mean? Whether or not it's 100% true or not, this is really heavy on my heart right now. My heart's on fire, and if I don't say something, then I'm just really not living up to the standard that I want to live by. And that goes
That's the
into my
burden.
question that I was going to ask you. Is like, the other day in a comment on one of my posts, you had said something like, "But I do agree that people should try to be more like Christ."
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
from my perspective, if you think that and you also try to live by that ethical code, then to me, I would consider you a Christian, even though
Right.
you don't say, Jesus is God, or you don't even believe in a personal God. It's like you still believe in Jesus. Like, that's believing in Jesus. That's
Yeah,
what it
believe
means
in.
to
Yeah,
me.
it's like the language we're using. Like what do we mean by believe in? Like someone could say, well, do you believe in America? Some people would say no, but they may understand that America as a country exists, but they don't believe
Right.
in America. What do they mean by believe in? Like it means
Right.
the principles or the teaching resonates with you, and so you believe in it. So in that sense of the word, yeah, and I always say that. Like I was telling you about the street preacher guy. Like I just asked, he didn't. It really threw him off because he was like, "Well, do you believe in Jesus?" I was like, I don't know. And he's like, "What do you mean you don't know?" I was like, "Because I don't know what you mean. What do you mean believe in Jesus? What does that mean?" Because if you're saying that, do I believe in helping the poor, the widow, being kind to others? I guess I believe in that. And he was like, "No, that's not what I mean. You know what I mean?" Like, no, I really don't, because you know, believing in something can mean a lot of things. And that's why it's really important to kind of get definitions and understand where people are coming from, because maybe there's a bridge we can build that's there that you don't even realize it because you're putting up a roadblock from that bridge.
Yeah.
And
And that's really my whole thing, is like, I really appreciate being here with you today talking about this stuff, but I want to take this to my own platform and start my own YouTube channel, where that's where my focus is
Mhm.
like building these bridges, being that kind of mediator between the atheist community and the Christian community, where, there's a lot of really ridiculous things, like when Christians say, well, you're an atheist, so you don't have any morality. It's like, what? Like, that's not even close to how it works. You know what I mean? Your belief in Jesus does nothing for your morality. I know plenty of people who believe in Jesus that I probably don't want to spend a whole lot of time with, because they're just really not that great.
Very
I'm
dogmatic.
saying,
Yeah, because
um,
and I have
they
had this
do love too. I'm
discussion.
not saying they don't, but
Mhm.
yeah. Uh,
In
but
morality, talking about morality can be touchy because a great deal of Christians look at morality as this objective standard. Like they look at it like, well, the moral is objectively written here. And so when you're not following this particular writing, you're being immoral, because morality is defined as whatever God says you should do. That is the moral duty that you have. So if God said all of it, like as a hypothetical in their mind, and I asked this preacher that the other day, if God told you and you were convinced, that 100% convinced in this hypothetical thought experiment, if God told you to go kill that baby over there, would that be the moral thing to do? And they're like, well, no, God would never do that. I'm like, no, that's not you're evading the thought experiment. The thought experiment, hypothetically, you are convinced that God says, kill that baby. Don't ask me why, just do it. And you just said, whatever God says do, that's the moral duty. So is that
right,
moral? And he's like,
yeah,
didn't want to answer the question. So it's like, that's where the tension comes in there, is like, when it comes to morality, it seems like the whole meaning of morality is wrapped up in your experience, in your understanding of what is right and wrong, you personally, subjectively, because if it's not, you're just following orders. And the Nazis could have been moral under that understanding, you know, the might makes right type of argument, right? But there are, though, I would say, in my own personal view, that I think morality is a little bit both. It's a little bit of subjectivity, but it's also a little bit of objectivity, in the sense that, you know, it seems like we naturally evolved to survive, to thrive, you know, as a species. Well, in order to accomplish our genetic drivers, then we have to cooperate, you know, as a species. Like, one person can sacrifice his life for the betterment of the entire. That's a moral thing to do, right? Because
Yeah.
the objective fact is, if you don't do it, then the species might die off. Let's say, for example, let's say Al Qaeda or whoever had plans to build this weapon that was going to demolish, like, millions of people in the United States or somewhere else, right? And in order to get this, you had to do two things. You had to lie to get in there, and then you had to steal to get those plans away from them, in order to do this higher good, which was to. But lying and stealing are sins. They're objectively wrong, right? So who are you to decide to go against what God says you shouldn't do? You should pray to God and say, God, open up a way where I don't have to steal and lie. But in the real world, that there may not be time for all that, and it's bullshit. Like, you should know what's the higher principle here, which is saving,
Well,
trolley car problem or whatever.
yeah, I think when it all comes down to is like, I've told you about this before, but it's like the moment you write the truth, it becomes a little less true. You know what I mean? Whenever Moses had those tablets and it had the 12 commandments, it was like, yeah, these laws might have been very great for whatever they had going on at that point. You know, like you said, like, what would help us survive? You know, they had this small village of Hebrew Israelites out in the wilderness trying to survive. You know what I mean? I could see why they would have these like laws about sexuality and, you know, don't tattoo or cut your skin, because, you know, back then there was not these hygienic methods of doing tattoos. You could have got an infection. If you had too many people doing homosexual intercourse, then maybe be enough repopulation to sustain the population or whatever. I could see like why maybe those archaic laws would have fit, but I think when Jesus comes, he kind of turns that on its head and makes it more about a standard of ethics more than a moral list of rules. So whenever he says, you know, love your neighbor as yourself, well, for one, that's because he basically is, you know what I mean? Like, we're all the same. There's nothing different about me or you. You know, I should love you because you are me in a different body with different experiences. But beside that fact, it's like a fluid ethics. Like you said, it's like, you know, you got to kind of weigh it a lot of the times. You know, one rule doesn't always apply. It isn't always the morally best thing to do in this situation, and it gets a little sketchy. But I think, and that's one thing that that mystic Marguerite Porete, her book, The Mirror of the Simple Soul, that's the book that got her burned at the stake for being a heretic. But that's what it was basically saying, was like, once you attain this certain level of closeness with God, per se, then it becomes less about the religion and more just about your way of life. And like, even Jesus I don't think he was trying to start a religion. I don't think that was Jesus's goal. He was trying to show us a way of living, and that's what the first Christians were called, was followers of the way. And that's like Taoism. Taoism, Tao means the way. The way that can be explained is not the eternal way. It's really more about a way of life, a way of living your life that centers around love, agape love, not romantic love, not friendship, love, camaraderie. I mean, all that. It's an unconditional love that you have for mankind and the experience of being itself. So when I say, thank you, God, I'm really just thinking whatever is the reason that I am experiencing anything at all. Like, I'm grateful to that. And I don't know what it is, and I can't put my finger on it. It's ungraspable. It's hard to explain using language, especially the English language is probably one of the worst languages to try to use to discuss these terms. And people like John Vervaeke, he goes into his what he calls transcendent naturalism, which is what I would call like a more atheistic approach to mysticism, where he's just trying to break it all down scientifically and develop an ecology of practices that can help lead to these transformational experiences. But he has to invent words.
Leading the same.
Because there's not good language in English to use to be able to explain a lot of these concepts. But yeah, I mean, if anyone's listening and they're really skeptical and don't really believe in any of this woo-woo pseudoscience bullshit, I would really just encourage them to go check out John Vervaeke's YouTube channel and check out his Awakening from the Meaning Crisis and After Socrates. They're really long video series, but they break all this stuff down in a way that, I mean, a lot of it goes over my head. Like, I never went to college, but a lot of what he says, it's like, boom, yes, I know exactly what he's talking about. I've experienced that myself. And
I think a good measure of something that we can really go with is when two things kind of unify. Like, like science, like some people like to make the separation, and which is valid sometimes. Science is a certain kind of method at arriving at certain kind of truths, like namely how things behave, like how things act. And when you do this is what we can predict will happen, therefore this becomes a fact, in a tentative fact, like based on evidence. There may be down the line some other evidence will refute that, and then we have a clearer idea, kind of like what happened between Newtonian physics and relativity, where certain things that we understood within a certain framework, but as we built out a different framework, we were able to understand so much more, and we were able to actually unify in relativity with Newtonian physics. But then now we have quantum mechanics, which deals with a different layer of reality. Quantum mechanics is the way things behave on a very small level that we don't really experience. Like, we don't experience the quantum world. We experience this Newtonian in relativity, and so quantum mechanics is obviously going to be a little bit mysterious. Consciousness is a little bit mysterious. Therefore, there's a tendency to put the two together. But now we have this thing called quantum biology, which does indicate that there's a lot of features in our conscious experience that have everything to do with quantum things, like our sense of smell, the way that, European robins can traverse the earth. They use quantum entanglement to do that. This is consciousness. This is how they perceive things. And so some kind of collapse happens and they're able to do certain things called quantum biology, affects DNA, all kinds of things. It goes on and on. The olfactory, like I said, the smell. So there's a lot to do with that. Now, some people, like idealists, let's say, there's people that like what's his name, Bernardo Castro, who is
Yeah.
a idealist, and he would say, well, that quantum stuff is just more materialism. It's just more materialistic philosophy at work, because when you're doing that sort of reduction, you're sort of buying into this idea that reality can be reduced down to quantum fields, and he's kind of against that because it's kind of like a dualistic sort of, and it's not idealism. Idealism is monistic. It's like everything is one. So everything that you experience is not physical. It's all mental processes. It's like, this collapse is not a physical thing. It's a mental thing, and it's just part of this overall cosmic natural mind that exists, in this mental field rather than a physical quantum field. You see, the materialists have it all backwards. They're trying to invoke materialism to explain things they can't explain. Like, there would be no hard problem of consciousness under idealism, because consciousness is the fundamental thing of reality. That's what reality is founded on, is conscious experience. Whereas under materialism, conscious experience is founded on quantum fields, at the very bottom. So he's saying I'm kind of against that whole thing. So there's different arguments. A materialist, atheistic sort of view would kind of look at quantum things as explaining consciousness, where, but it's valid though. I can't say that it's not, because the thing about it is it works. Like, if
Yeah, and like
medicine, using this computer right now, the fact that we're able to discuss this is because people a lot smarter than us use materialism to come up with a way to transfer data and do all this stuff that we're enjoying and using. So it's kind of a betrayal. It's kind of like a refutation of what we use in a way. But, someone like maybe Bernardo Castro would say, well, that's just what it looks like within the mind. There's a mechanics to the dream. It's like, this is just how the dream is put together. So it's an ontological thing. But I guess my problem, or my agnosticism, comes in kind of like you. How can we test it? How do we know the difference then? If there's no difference that we can really put our finger on, other than saying that idealism explains away the hard problem of consciousness, but then what we've done now is we've made the hard problem of matter now. Now it's a hard problem of matter, in my view. Like, how can we explain matter under consciousness? How do we explain that? And so either way you look at it, any way you carve it, there's always going to be a hard problem there. But to me, like, when I went into my DMT experience, what it told me was, it doesn't matter. Just embrace what is your experience. Your experience is that when you touch this couch, it's solid. That's good enough.
Yeah, I agree completely. Like, I love the idealist. I love listening to Bernardo Castro and like Donald Hoffman, you know, and they're really going hard trying to get this in the sense, like, that's some old ancient hermetic principle of God is mental. Everything is mental. Like, the whole universe is just something that's happening in God's mind. And so, like, one analogy I like to use for that is saying that God is just this quantum dungeon master, and we're all players in this Dungeons and Dragons game, you know, where he creates the universe, but we're all helping him write the story, like co-creating with him as we go throughout this linear time. But like you said, it's like there's no way to really definitively say that is what it actually is. And I never, like, even though I like to play with these thought experiments, I never once would go as far as to say, okay, well, God's the answer, that solves that problem. You know what I mean? It's like, no, you can always go deeper. Like, maybe God is not the answer. Like, let's figure it out. You know what I mean? I'm not going to say for sure one way or the other. I know which way I tend to lean.
Like last week when I had that conversation with my guest last week, we kind of talked about that. Now he said it's just an absolute truth claim that he's making. It's absolutely true that the Zoroastrian God is God. That's just the truth. Because without that God, you wouldn't know what's possible or impossible, right and wrong, without that particular God, right? And you can call it whatever you want to call it. You're just arguing for the poop sandwich again. But at the end of the day, you're just talking about my God. You just keep talking about my God. You keep praising my God. Every time you invoke some sort of thing, you're just propping up my God again. And my whole thing was, well, that's kind of like kicking the can down the road, because you can turn that on its head. Like, then if he says, because everything needs an explanation, and I'm like, well, what explains your God? And he's like, well, except that doesn't need an explanation, like special pleading fallacy. So it's like, so the universe can't always, the universe can't be eternal, but my God can. So it's like, well, how do you know that? How can we test that? How, at least we know the universe exists. I'm working what we know exists. I'm working what we're all agreeing on, at least. Right?
Yeah.
It may all be a simulation. It may all be. Yeah.
The Buddha says to avoid pointless speculation about metaphysics. And I wholeheartedly agree with that. It's just like what you said. It's like, okay, if all of this is just an illusion, it's all imaginary, it's like, what difference does that make in my everyday life? Nothing. Not at all. Nothing. Absolutely none. Oh, well, free will doesn't exist. It's like, I could see why you would say that. I'm just a product of every single butterfly effect that led up to this moment right here in my life. And whatever I do next will just be a complete causal relation of all that. But
what difference does it make?
I feel like I have free will.
It's all definitions and frameworks, It's like
experience.
Yeah,
so I'm gonna treat life like free will exists, even if it doesn't. That's just
right.
It doesn't make sense.
Right, because if for me, freedom is like, for me, the real meaning of free will is like, as long as some external pressure doesn't stop me from doing what I want to do. But the problem with that is we're always going to do what we want to do at the end of the day. It's just that it's all going to be kind of guided by our situation and context. It's like, I may not want to give up my wallet to some stranger, but if the dude puts a gun to my head and gives me an option, either choose to give me your wallet or choose to die, then I'm going to want to give my wallet up, right? It's like,
right.
And even if I wanted to sacrifice my life, like, let's say, I don't want to give up my wallet, so kill me. Then I'm just deciding that's what I want, better, more. It's like you can never get out of what you want to do. You're always kind of enslaved to your wants. So in that sense, I understand about no free will in that sense. But in another sense, we have these choices and we're able to make those choices and we can kind of go with what we want to do. And in that sense, yeah, we have free will, unless somebody just forcibly physically takes you and, manipulates you, then you wouldn't have free will.
I think it's hilarious. And like in my worldview, God is personal and also has a sense of humor. In all these random, ironic circumstances that happen all the time, you can always like find something humorous about it, or like hopefully, otherwise you might go a little insane because life is crazy. But one thing I think is hilarious about free will is like what I've learned about it is that denying yourself is the most freeing thing you can do.
Yeah.
So like, stopping yourself from doing the one thing you really want to do actually is so empowering, to just be able to know that you can do that. It gives you such a freeing sense to just,
put
down the cigarette.
that
whatever it
kind of
is. You know
that
what I
kind
mean?
of volition
Being
is
self-aware.
what gives you meaning. Because, like, let's say, here's another thought experiment that I usually ask a lot of, not necessarily putting you on the spot with it, because I already kind of figured you're going to agree, but a lot of people, like my guest last week, I put up a question. It was, let's say, and he was, his thing was like, well, morals come from God. They shouldn't come subjectively. They come objectively. So God, his God is the one who makes us do moral things, and then we'll be moral by following God. So I asked him, I said, well, okay, then let me run a little thought experiment with you. Let's say you go to the bank, you got person A. Person A goes to the bank. He noticed there's little cameras on the wall, watching you. So the guy in front of him drops his wallet, and he's got or drops like $1,000 bill or something like that. And because he knows the camera's there, he picks up the money, but then he looks and he sees the camera, and he gives him his money. So he did the right thing, gave him the money, but it was because he was being watched. Then you got person
Right.
B, who there's no cameras. He knows nobody's going to know it. He takes the money and he gives it to the guy anyways, because, he doesn't want to see the guy, be without his $1,000. Out of these two people, person A, person B, who do you think would be the most moral person from the two people?
Oh yeah, definitely B.
Yeah,
Person
B.
number two. Yeah, of course. And like, I think that I remember I heard you say something about an atheist who had a near-death experience,
Mm-hmm.
and they experienced God, and God had told them, like, hey, actually, it's you guys, it's the atheists that I'm really rocking with,
That's
because
right.
y'all are doing the right thing for the sake of doing the right thing, not for the sake of
Right.
avoiding torture or to claim some reward or whatever. It's like that. Yeah. And I completely agree with that. I think that's a really unfortunate thing that came out of religion. And it's not, I don't think that, yeah, that doesn't make it any more moral. And I think, yeah, what I have experienced from God, what you told me about their NDE actually makes sense. Like,
Yeah.
that's the type of thing that I would expect God to be like if
Right.
my experience of God is true. And like, okay, so to kind of break down my metaphysics, I'm about to have to wrap it up, but
Okay, sure.
I'll just go ahead and give you a real quick, brief summary, and then maybe we can get into this some other time.
Sure.
But so, like in the Eastern traditions, in Hinduism and Buddhism, they have samsara, which is the infinite cycle of death and rebirth.
Mm-hmm.
To me, that's what I believe Christ is referring to as like hell. So, welcome to hell. We're in it. Me and you. This is hell. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, we're in this infinite cycle of birth and death,
Yep.
and we're learning. We're in the process of learning, and so it's not going to get any worse than this. There's not like a physical torture you have to avoid. You just have to learn to be more and more ethical and mindful and aware. And I think the goal is just to be mentally able to live forever, which
Mm-hmm.
I am not. Like, if I was just granted eternal life in my current mental state, you know what I mean? I think it's going to take us a long time to get there, but I think we're on the cusp of this paradigm shift where you're about to start seeing a lot more people growing a lot more spiritually minded, adding a whole bunch of these spiritual practices into their life, and then as a result, becoming more ethical and becoming more mindful and becoming more compassionate humans. And I could be wrong about this, but this is what I have hope for. I have hope that Jesus didn't just come here to be a sacrifice to himself, and that without his brutal death on the cross and his blood, that there's no hope for us. What I believe, our salvation came from Jesus' life and Jesus' teachings, and there's a word for that. It's called the moral atonement theory. And moral influence, not the penal substitution where Jesus had to take all this punishment that was really meant for us. That doesn't seem moral at all. And if that's how God operates, that's God that I would want to worship. But what I really believe is that Jesus came here, whether he was God or not, he had a mission to show us the way to live. And I think more and more people, whether they claim to be Christian or not, are just naturally heading more down that ethical standard of life. And so when I say I have faith in Jesus, that's what I mean. I mean, I feel like I see us heading down this path where, yeah, it's about to get really crazy. And yeah, the government's about to start clinching down on controlling everything. And it might get really hard and really dark out here for us. But I feel like there's always that hope. At the end of the day, people can go inside themselves and find this light that we've been talking about all night. And hopefully
that's the thing that I'm hopeful to. I'm hopeful for that. And this is part of the reason I have the channel called Discussion. And I don't want to be like an adversarial sort of person with anybody. I'd rather have a discussion, respect each other mutually. And so a lot of atheists are so committed to their atheism, their unbelief in God, which is fine, but they're so adversarial about it. The same with the Christians. They can be or Muslims or religious believers. They can really be adversarial. And, the trick to all this is going to be to accept that we're not all alike. We all understand reality different. We all have different experiences. We have different things that make us who we are, and it's okay. It's not the end of the world. Let's find some commonality and build on that. And that comes from conversations, expressing ideas. Like I said, English language is very limited because our thought processes have been limited since we humans have been on this planet. So we're only hopefully growing and getting better at our language and getting better at describing things. And I think that's where science comes in on that level. But we need to start talking to each other, not at each other, and understanding each other. And in the way that the real value in a good conversation like that is to do street epistemology, like I was kind of discussing before the show, is that sometimes you can simply ask key questions in order to understand. And what I've come to realize, and one person was a fundamentalist Christian, and he decided to come on my show, and this was a couple years ago, and it was a different channel, and it was a show called Exploring Epistemology. And this Christian came on, had questions, and was like, I'll play the game with you. Let's do street epistemology. I want to see. What happened was questions were presented that he just didn't think about, very simple. And he said, yeah, I know on the show I was kind of like really aggressive or whatever, and to your question, but I really didn't have an answer. When I go back and review it, all I really had was a lot of kicking and screaming, but nothing really convincing to myself. So it planted a seed of doubt in his mind, to understand where maybe someone else is coming from. So he's like, so what I learned from that is that people are valid for their unbeliefs. People are valid for their beliefs or their unbeliefs. Like if you just stop and listen and think outside of your own, because we got to get out of our minds sometimes. And,
and that's it goes back to like what I was saying about one of the key components to having these mystical experiences is this openness to correction, like the ability to say, hey, there's no way in hell I'm right about everything. Like, let's be real. Let's have a little bit of intellectual honesty with ourselves and just admit that there's no way. There's just no way. I'm not the smartest guy in the world. I don't have it all figured out. I don't have all the answers. But that's the first step in being able to hear what someone else has to say. You know what I mean? Otherwise, you just disregard it all, and it doesn't matter anything. The conversation was completely fruitless. Nobody got anything out of it. It was just this really angry, combative back and forth, and that's not what I enjoy. That's not why I'm here. I'm not here to be the most correct. I'm here to learn and grow and have these discussions. Like you said, we need to talk more.
Exactly. If we could, I would like to play a video before you leave. I know your time is limited. But I want to play something. I've got a friend, his name is Reed Nice Wonder, and he kind of introduced me. I've had him on my show once actually, and this kind of goes into it. I'm going to play a little bit of his video, just to kind of give you an idea of what we mean by this is real good street epistemology at work, and it shows you what it's all about, right? And this guy's like a real pro at it, and it's really interesting. Anyways, I'm gonna share this video if I can. Hold on just a second. Takes just a moment. Here we go. And he's talking to a Christian, and he's doing a really good job with street epistemology. So I'll let you hear this real quick.
Or I slept through it.
What's your first name?
Tia.
Tia. How do you spell that?
TIA.
TIA. Simple. All right, Tia. So, yeah, just have this hobby where I chat with people about anything. Is there a particular belief you want to chat about?
Is there what?
A particular belief that you want to chat about? Something you really think is true?
Christianity.
Sure. We can talk about that if you want.
I don't care.
All right. First, got to get a sense of your confidence that the Christian God is real and true. Say on a scale from 0 to 100.
95.
95.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And what gives you to such high confidence? What's the main reason why?
So I go to a Christian school, and I've taken a bunch of classes on theories and all these different things, and it just makes sense to me. It kind of like hits home, and I just have this feeling that it's really true.
Gotcha. So you go to Christian school, you've taken some classes about theories, and it just makes sense to you?
Yeah, it just makes sense. And like all the other like religions I've learned about, it's just it doesn't make sense to me personally.
Okay. How does something making sense to you relate to the actual truth of it? So, like, could someone actually be mistaken about a belief that makes sense to them?
Yeah, I think they could.
Okay. And how did you determine that this was actually true?
Just all like the proof and the theories.
What's like the best example?
There's a lot actually. So, like the Babel Tower, they found it. They found where it was.
They found the Babel Tower?
Yeah.
All right. I'm not saying this is the case, but if someone came up to the table and explained to us that this actually didn't happen exactly the way we think it did, would that change your confidence in the belief at all?
No.
Okay. So maybe is there a reason why you're such high confidence that it's true?
Just because I just see so much like goodness in it and positivity, and I'm really about like positivity, and God's just out to love people. So I think it's important to look up to him and do what he did and just love people.
Gotcha. So you're saying it's just there's so much goodness to it and it's really positive.
Mm-hmm.
How does the goodness or positivity of a belief relate to the truth of the belief, though?
I think it says it all in the Bible. Like, it's a tough question.
That's fine. So you're saying it comes from the Bible, the positivity and the message?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and just because the Bible says something, does that make it actually true?
In my belief, it does. Not everybody believes that just because it says it doesn't make it true. A lot of people are like, oh, well, since I didn't see it, it's not true. But I think just there's a lot of evidence to it. So
Okay. So it's not really the proof in the Bible. It's like, but below that, it's like it's just your belief in the Bible that gives
it
you
just makes
confidence.
sense to me.
Just makes sense.
Like people used to live for like 800 years back then, and a lot of people question that. But the reasoning was because God told them to go and multiply, but he wanted them to keep multiplying and multiplying. So the more the population increases, the less we live, we decrease in age.
You're saying people used to live to 800 years old, and you know this because of the Bible?
It says in the Bible that they would live until like 800 or 700.
Okay. Is everything that the Bible says true?
In my opinion, it is.
Okay. Is just having an opinion about a belief a reliable way to conclude that it's true?
No,
In my
but I think in the end, it
opinion,
matters what you believe.
What do you mean?
Like it doesn't matter. I think in the end, it matters what I believe, not anybody else. It's my life. So if I truly believe this, then I will go to heaven.
If you truly believe, then you'll go to
Jesus, that Jesus is God's son. Because to get into heaven, all you need is a little bit of faith. You could have faith as small as a mustard seed.
What do you mean by faith?
Like belief that God is God, that he is the almighty savior.
Are you saying faith is just belief?
Mhm.
Okay. Does just believing in something make that something true?
No.
Okay.
Just because you believe in Santa doesn't mean he's true. I mean, doesn't make it true. But
Okay. So yeah, like just believing in a God doesn't make it true, right?
not unless you truly know.
Unless you truly know.
Digging a hole.
How could we know?
I think it's just faith, going back to faith.
It's just faith?
It's not, that's what I believe. Having faith.
Just believing in something give you knowledge about it?
I think so.
If someone just believed in Santa, does that give them knowledge about Santa?
No, but you got to do, like, there's no evidence for Santa.
Is there evidence for a God?
Mm-hmm.
What's the best one?
There's a lot. Like I said, there's a lot. I have to think, but you're putting me on the spot. It's hard. I have them written down, actually, in here.
Okay. If all of that evidence, I'm not saying it's not true, that evidence, but if all that evidence was found to be not reliable, would that change your confidence that the God is real?
No.
So it's not
It really wouldn't.
So it's not really about evidence either?
No, it's just about faith.
And faith is just belief?
I think faith is different than belief.
So you kind of get the point. It's like trying to nail people down on getting to the bottom of what it is that drives people into these beliefs. Like it seems like she would throw one thing up, and then when you really ask her about it and give her examples, she's like, oh, well, that doesn't matter. Okay, so let's put that off the table then. So what is it? Well, it's faith. Well, if someone has faith in Santa Claus, does that make it true? No. Okay, then what is it? It's evidence. Well, if they showed evidence that it wasn't true, would that help? No, that wouldn't matter. So it's like, well, what is it?
I caught that part. That's hilarious. It's like, well, what if we like showed you that what you believe is not true? Would that change your mind? No. Right. Okay, well, that's that then. I guess that settles that. But no, I think that
the whole point is we're trying to have a discussion. So it's like we're trying to understand you. So it's like you're not really making sense. So why is it okay for you, but yet you're going to condemn other people for their beliefs? And you can easily point out, but you have a separate standard for yourself. And just getting people to kind of understand this concept that if you really explore your beliefs, you're going to find out that at some point you have no foundation. Your foundation is probably just feelings, or because you've been told a certain thing all your life. And it's something, like you said, outside of their own experience. it's something they were taught, maybe someone else's experience. They just like to hear it, and they ground it on other people's experience, you know.
Yeah,
And
I got a few things I want to say, but then I gotta go.
Sure.
It's getting late.
No worries.
But yeah, so I got a few quotes here that I want to read
Mhm.
that are pertaining to what we just watched.
Right.
Theologian. So this is fairly recent. This isn't right after Christianity started. This is way after, just 100 years ago or so. But he says, in the days ahead, he's referring to Christians. In the days ahead, you will either be a mystic, one who has experienced God for real, or you will be nothing at all. And I think that's actually quite prophetic to where we're at right now in modern day. Like mainstream Christianity nowadays, you see a whole lot of that kind of cognitive dissonance where it's really just about the belief. And if you even try to mention doing good, righteous works, they're like, no, it's not works. It's not works-based salvation. It's faith-based. You just have to believe in the right thing. And then you have all these conflicting denominations, and some of these denominations are very militant about it, where they're the most fundamental in saying, no, you have to believe exactly our version of Christianity or you're not a true Christian. But then even just mainstream Christianity as a whole will find someone like me who believes in universalism or perennialism, and they'll say, well, you're not a Christian. And my whole thing is what Jesus is talking about, and the heretics would be the ones who think that it's just about having the exact, very specific belief, and everyone else is going to hell. Sorry about your bad luck. It's like, no, that's divisive. That is the antithesis of what Christ was trying to do while he was here. And I just can't vibe with it. I can't get down with it. And it kind of makes me ashamed to even call myself a Christian sometimes because of how bad it gets, where people are trying to go into the government and make
laws
all
on
these
it.
force religion onto other people who don't even want any part of it. And it's like, man, like you said, their unbelief is valid. They shouldn't have to be forced to follow our religion. That's ridiculous. And if that's going to be the case, then our churches need to start paying some taxes or something. You know what I mean? Like, let's be at least, I don't know. There's a whole lot. I could go into it all night.
I
but
know. I think that
this is another quote. Oh.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think, in my opinion, I think people want to believe in belief. And the reason they want to believe in belief is because it sounds good. They want to be the moral person. And so if they kind of equate believing in this with morality, they want to be on the right side. And they don't need to have justifiers.
Yeah, and it's also just a really easy way to shrug off all the responsibility that comes along with that, you know, and I can't. So here's this other quote by the same guy, Karl Rahner, and he says, the number one cause of atheism is Christians, those who proclaim with their mouths and deny him with their actions, is what an unbelieving world finds unbelievable. And I think, you know, that's where we're at right now. I'm not trying to stand up here on some moral high horse. You know, I got plenty of my own problems. I'm not a perfect person, but I think if we really want to see some good change in the world, it would be awesome if atheists could get kind of where I'm at, and instead of telling everybody who claims to be a Christian, oh, well, you're just stupid, you're following the goat herder's guide to the galaxy, all the people who wrote the Bible were like illiterate, and like I think these men were genius. They were narrative masters and really really wise with like the allegorical construction of the biblical narrative. But instead of just saying, "Oh, well, you just believe in a bunch of fairy tales," why not use the Bible against us? You know what I'm saying? Like, use Jesus against us, and I think that would be. Yeah, I think that would be a better approach than just saying, "Well, you're just stupid and you're not rational because you're a theist." It's like, well, use the Bible and tell them, "Hey, well, actually, this is what Jesus says you should be doing instead of what you are doing, and that's what I'm doing within my own religion. It's not working out very well." As you could imagine, us heretics haven't been received very well throughout history, but yeah, it is what it is. Maybe we'll make a difference someday.
Well, that's the whole point of this show, is to have you guys, Christians, Muslims, atheists, everybody, when it comes to that discussion, come on and let's talk about it, and let's be open, man, and let's do it respectfully and cordially.
Right.
That's my whole point, is we can build bridges, because look, at the end of the day, it's going nowhere. Religion's not going anywhere. It's been here for thousands of years. You might as well stop trying to fight that good fight of ending religion, or whatever your case is, or promoting only your religion over others, because it's not going to happen. I mean, the track record is that multiple religions exist because multiple types of people exist, and people have different understandings of reality, and it's okay. It's just as you have your right to believe what you do or don't believe what you don't, so do other people, and it might conflict with you, but it's okay. It's not the end of the world. It's like, can we get past all of this controlling behavior? Like, it's not that important to me. I don't know.
Yeah, stop trying. Stop trying.
That's what DMT told me.
Yeah, that's what my mystical experience told me. We got the same message, bro.
That's all right, man.
Well, I gotta go. It was such a pleasure, and I really love to do this again with you sometime, for sure.
You will.
So just holler
Let
at
me know, man. Anytime, you're welcome. And we'll definitely catch up. And guys, if you like the show, like and subscribe. And we'll meet again on Wednesday. Hopefully, we'll have somebody up, and we'll do it again. All right,
cool.
Logue.
Thank you.
And Sophia says she was glad to meet you too.
Oh, right on. Yeah, her too.
All righty, guys. We'll see you later, man. Have a great night.
You too. Thank you.
Right. You're welcome.
I guess so.
You did amazing. I seen some of it. I was watching.
On YouTube?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, we watched some of it.